Good morning, everyone. My name is Aditi Joshi. I am the Vice Chair at Austin Sister Cities, and welcome to our training today for visiting Austin, Texas. This is the third training of 4 trainings that we have hosted in 2023. Our next training will be in the fall, and we will advertise that in the weeks leading up to the training. Our host for today is Dr. Kevin Clark with Austin Community College. He has been a facilitator in the past, and he does an incredible job of bringing the world together. And we will be streaming this training live on Facebook in the next minute. So if you have friends and family who cannot attend the training on Zoom, they're welcome to view it on Facebook. And with that, Kevin, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Aditi. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to I believe it's the first day of fall, maybe. So as we are getting into our year here, this is kind of a nice a switch because we're all here mostly, I guess, in Austin, and you can correct me if these are not the right impressions of the U.S., the South, Texas, and Austin. But I think I've got a good array here. I hope you enjoy this, and let's get started. Okay, so for our colleagues in other countries, other cities coming to visit Austin, I had to think, this is why this is called Austin, Texas, USA, because we've got successively narrowed areas, starting with the US, then and somewhat the South and Texas come together. There is a Texan touch, and we'll even distinguish a little here between Dallas, Austin, and Houston. So first, as I was saying, we're gonna be looking at some fun facts about Austin. Look at culture and stereotypes and where they come from for the U.S. and for Texas, and our usual setup of greetings, meetings, dining, and refining, and then just end it with a little bit of Austin today, a little promotion for our own dear city. So, of course, here's our beautiful. It's fun to get these pictures yourself on the little boardwalk off of off downtown. Well, one of the things to think about Texas, if you've ever seen an episode of, we're big enough now that we are a prize on Let's Make a Deal. And every time it's about Austin, they always show 3 things. They show live music, they show a field of bluebonnets, and they show barbecue. So of course, this is what we're going to be looking at today, because they can be stereotypes, but they're also true. And how much do we embrace those stereotypes? Well, some fun facts first. If you haven't been down to the Congress Street Bridge, you probably know this from April to October, so you're still in luck. 1.5 million bats fly out from under the bridge every night, and they consume as much as 30,000 pounds of insects every evening. So that's why it's our friendly this is our friendly helpers here. And in fact, at ACC, our mascot is the river bat. Of course, it doesn't really exist. It's purple, but it certainly reflects a very nice feature of Austin. One that might be a little more frightening, and this is something I have people visiting from other countries that ask me, and ask, from other states as well. As of 2 years ago, a House bill made it legal in Texas for most people 21 and over to carry a handgun in a holster without a permit, both openly and or concealed. So I checked the stats on that, and your chance of being oh, I'm hearing a little bit of background here. Is that okay? So I checked the stats. Your chance of being a victim of a violent crime in Austin is about 1 in 200. It's higher than some states, but with the number of guns, it's actually lower than other states in terms of percentage. So this you might see. And another one, in terms of course, our increasing technology, is our Tesla Gigafactory is right on the outskirts of toward Del Valley is Tesla's Gigafactory. It has about 2,000 acres of land, and there's lots of ways to measure this. It's about 15 city blocks. I've driven by there when they were building it, if you saw it, and it makes it the 2nd biggest building in the world by volume. The first biggest is the Boeing plant in outside of Seattle. And usually the plants say Tesla on the top, but they modified it a little bit. If you'll notice, they took the same letters and changed the L into an X, and they got Texas here. Okay, so one of the things to look at is population. I mean, of course, we're aware of this, but someone visiting, maybe kind of unaware of just how large things are. I remember being in Ireland and somebody talking about differences between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And, you know, I mentioned something about the US and they go, well, you know, that's a country too, but if you think about it, really the US is a subcontinent of North America. So if you look at our population, it's quite large. We're the third largest in the world after China and India. And of course, that's reversing. India is becoming the most populous country, and then China, and then the US. We are the second largest state of population after California. You'll note there we have nearly 10% of the population, and we are one of the fastest growing. The Northeast and the upper Midwest, particularly the Rust Belt, is decreasing every year. Austin's population now, as of about 2 months ago, makes us the 10th biggest city. We surpassed San Jose, California. And of course, if you measure the actual city size versus metro, because we have over 2 million people in the metro area. So this is nice to know when people come and see that you have to successively narrow to actually see where we kind of stand in the US and the world stage. I wanted to just bring in a little bit of theory here without making it overwhelming. So Gerda Hofstede was a Dutch researcher who found that he worked for IBM, and he was talking to someone who was English who also worked for IBM, and they realized that it was the same somewhat corporate culture, but the national culture that their businesses were in were quite different. So we worked up a scale that has 6 components. For our purposes, we're looking at just 3 here. And you can see as I put in some of our sister city countries here, you can do comparisons on the Hofstede site where we can look at some big ones. For example, power distance, individualism, and masculinity. And these have really formed what the US is. We have the numbers in terms of the size of the city and the state country, but we have to start with looking at what is the US's culture. And of course, things like personal freedom, liberty, independence, and equality are a big guiding feature. It doesn't mean that everyone is equal or independent or et cetera, but it is a guiding principle of the United States. And I would argue here that it is based in 3 main areas. First is power distance. You notice in the circle there in the green, we rank pretty low, and just in comparison to the 3 countries I have listed on 3 different continents. We have a belief in equality. We have less regard for authority. We do have seniority, but we do not generally want to see people as different. We call each other by our first names generally. I would say we draw a line maybe with students. So there's 1 line, but the rest, an administrator, professor, and wherever you are, you're probably calling each other by first names. The second is individualism. We rank very high on this. In fact, we rank highest of 192 countries, 91 out of 100. And that's part of our belief in the individual achievement in the American dream. The American dream was never about get together with other people and form you might form a company, but it's about how you get ahead. And that can have, of course, all of these are neither positive or negative, but they have positive or negative results. We are quite in contrast here with the other countries, where the flip side is collectivism. And then the last one, of course, is masculinity. The reverse of that is femininity. It has nothing to do with a person being gender, but it has to do with the society. We're a very masculine country, not as much as Japan, for example, but still high on the scale. And this means there is less social support. So we do not have socialized medicine. We're the rare exception in the industrialized West. I was a resident of Belgium. I was surprised myself. I had to get a wisdom tooth removed cost $8. It included pills and the surgery and everything. But for Americans to understand that, we simply talk about our public school system. All children in the United States from K through 12 are provided a free public education. So we are kind of a stepping stone in some ways to that, but this is part of our national cultural heritage. So we know the things we support, adult support, strongly, but I think it comes in the basis of these are underlying principles that have been around for hundreds of years. If you take a little look at this, this is what I have dubbed. I think a lot of it's based in what I call Conestoga wagon friendliness. Now, if you go outside of the Northeast, where the cities are closer together and they're larger, I lived in Providence, Rhode Island, and it is a very different culture there in terms of this. But when we were in the 1800s in particular, as settlers went across the plains, as you see here with this wagon, basically all you had was horses. You had yourself in the front, and you had your dry goods, your grain, seeds, a family, perhaps a pig. But you pass another Conestoga wagon, and think about it. There's not really Marshall Dillon out here. There's really no one, and someone could just simply shoot you and take your things. So what they learned to do is to simply smile as they went by. The gun is down, hidden away, of course, and they learned to smile. So even if they didn't mean to be a friend, as I show here at the bottom, they're friendly. I find this is perplexing, for example, for Europeans, that being friendly does not mean being a friend. Because, say, if you were in Scandinavia, you may have very few friends. My Finnish friend says you have one or none. But we don't really have so much more friends. We're just simply more friendly, and they're not really related. It's a way to get through the day. I think of it like this. We're going past people. We want it to be a smooth transition. And part of that is a smile, saying hello, as we're going to see. So even though we're individualists, we're nice to strangers so that we can get through the day. So let's see here. So our culture is a combination of individualism and equality, and that's led to this culture of friendliness. And one of the changes that creates in society is when we are in close proximity, there's a thing called bus rider syndrome, where people may not even tell a friend about something going on in their life, but they will talk to a total stranger about their life, especially the extended case like on an airplane. If you're not an American, this can be maybe a little distressing because you're not a therapist and you don't know them. So you're neither a friend nor a professional. But we also tend to sort of psychologize people. We were all sort of amateur therapists because we sort of listen and we try to offer advice even when we're not the expert. Now, I'm going to show you an example here. There is a show where they go over to Japan. It's Queer Eye in Japan. I happened to see us flipping through Netflix or something, and I was like, oh, it's about another culture. And in this one, they try to help people out, be a little more stylish and cook better, to be better with people. And in this case, I found this to be an incredibly American thing in a very non-American culture in Japan, where a mother and a daughter are talking. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get to that in just a second. But you see it everywhere. So what I look for was videos that show people who aren't used to this in our own country. It's hard to ask us, but of course we're friendly. That's part of our culture. But for example, here is someone's impressions of the US, and then I'll get to Japan.
First of all, Americans are really loud at restaurants. I can barely hear my friends speak. Now, something really weird that happens in smaller towns, people say hi to each other even if they don't know each other, which is, by the way, amazing. I enjoy saying hi to people that I don't know just because I see them.
So there you go. We go, well, of course, but a person who's not used to that, especially if they've lived here for a while, finds that a little unusual. Okay, now here's what I was talking about. So this person in the cast of the show is trying to help this mother and daughter communicate. Now, he's not a therapist. he is sort of just somebody on the bus, a bus rider, who's listening to problems and trying to fix it in an American way. It's a little confusing because they're in Japan, but yet he uses an American custom of doing this. So, as we can see, it's not as if there's a government, imposition here that you can't express your values. It has to do with the collectivist culture of Japan, and working groups doesn't require this sort of interpersonal exchange, and in fact requires more of an impersonal exchange. I thought this was a big clash and was a little embarrassing as an American. On the other hand, they invited him to teach them American things. That's the tough thing, right? If someone's visiting here, you want to accommodate their culture, but they are in the US at the same time. But the reason we feel uncomfortable is because we know that there's a culture clash. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where that culture comes from. We could argue that our combination of individualism and equality has led to a culture of friendliness. In fact, you probably knew this, but I find it kind of fascinating that the word Texas itself comes from a Caddo Indian word. I think it's pronounced ta-cha, which is, their guttural stops in there, which means friend. And of course, the Spanish took that and ended up calling the Hasinai Confederacy that's founded by the Caddo Tejas, or it became Texas. But think about what it means now. If you've read any old Mark Twain or such, we know that if there's the Texas on a steamboat, it means the largest room. Outside of Texas, if you get a big thick piece of toast, that's Texas toast. And it means proud. It's kind of a microcosm of the US itself, but more refined in a Texan form. In fact, when we have our visiting Danish students, I have to prompt them a little bit. I ask, what is your impression, before you came here, of Americans? And I got them to admit to two words, the words I listed, which are big and proud. So that means, we tend to go for quantity more than necessarily quality. We look at quantity and size. It's both a US and a Texan sort of feature. We upsize our fast food and drinks. And of course, that means Americans are upsized. 2/3 of Americans are overweight and 40% are obese. A very large percentage. We're not at the top of the world in any sense, but we're above the middle. So let's take a look at, this person makes videos. He's been to every country in the world and makes quick videos. He is an American, and made a quick video about the perception of the US in the world.
In many ways, America is amazing, but it's also really weird. Here are 3 wacky things that you'll find about American culture. Number 1, things are huge. Highways, cars, stores, food, and even people are really, really large. In America, you can find soda cups as big as your head.
That's a huge size, Grandma.
Huge! Number 2, we love small talk. When you're walking around the streets of the US, strangers will greet you by saying, "How are you? What's going on?" The funny thing is that they're not really asking how you're doing. They're just saying hi. Number 3, football is more popular than soccer. While the rest of the world is obsessed with soccer and the World Cup, Americans...
Yes. So we add in there American football, which we call football. And that gives us our uniqueness too, our individuality as a country, along with using royal or, measurements. And only a couple other countries in the world do that. So this is how we see ourselves. And of course, the point of this is not to say anything's bad or good, but simply, this is the perception. And one of the things we're going to play off here is to see how much of the perceptions are actually true. If you use Midjourney, it makes great images. And someone did a AI generated image of a Texan. So we have everything in here. We have a gun, we have, obesity, and we have a very large burger of some kind. A person didn't create this, a machine did, through the stereotypes of Texans. Also, one thing, if you've noted in Texas, especially if you're not from here, is that we like to brand things with Texas. Even right in our high schools and colleges, they learn Texas history. In a lot of states, they don't. They just learn US history. But for example, you'll see ads all the time for Dairy Queen or DQ, and they will call it Texas Dairy Queen. And of course, the headquarters is actually in Illinois. I'm not really sure why it's branded as Texas. Now, as you know, next month and in April, we're going to have solar eclipses. I hope everybody's got their glasses. Order them soon because they're going to get expensive. The annular in October 14th, and the full eclipse, April 8th. But I noticed an ad here. You can actually buy Texas solar eclipse glasses. They're called Totality Over Texas. So it's got a little brand there and it sells it, but it's a way of making both everyday food and the sun itself a Texan sort of item. Now, when you think of stereotypes, also, I'm not from Texas. I've lived in other countries and I've lived in 5 states, and I'm not from Texas. And one of my first images, in fact, of Texas was an old spaghetti Western, which of course means it's the slang for it's probably made in Italy. So it is plucked out of history, but a lot of it the stereotype. And there's actually a movie called Texas Adios.
As a boy, all the thoughts that through my mind were as a boy. Then one day, something in my childish.
So there we have it. We've got all the standard things, the old sort of Western town, the horse, a gun, someone's on the run. Probably a more accurate view. Certainly not the way it looked on Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and that sort of thing, where they're sort of knocked together buildings and not much of a road, just sort of a clearing there. But for example, when I lived in Belgium, for some reason, spaghetti Westerns were a big thing there. I don't know why. They were quite old, but I had people ask me, I wasn't from Texas, but they'd ask me about, is that what Texas is like? And I said, I don't know, because I hadn't actually been to Texas yet. But that is their image of Texas. Now, one of the first things I thought of in talking about Texas here today was an old rerun, if you remember the Mary Tyler Moore Show from the 1970s. This is from about 1971. And if you know, it's just a small TV station in Minneapolis. And the owner of it, they've never met, is a Texan. So they have to make him Texan. And it's about the most Texas thing in a 2-minute clip that you can imagine. Mary has to go visit him to try to save her boss's job. And I thought, okay, well, they'll probably put him in a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, but it went a little further than that.
All right, okay, I will go see Wild Jack Monroe.
Correct. I'm glad that's cleared up.
Gordy, how weird is he?
He is weird.
Hey, I got one there. Hey, there's another one bit to dust. Hi, old friend.
Mr. Monroe, listen, I came to see you about Lou Grant.
Lou Grant.
Well, he said that you personally hired him to be the news director at WJM.
Oh, yeah, my station here in town.
Well, Mr. Phelps is going to fire him.
Oh, Slim Phelps, my new station manager. He's going to fire him, huh?
Yes, sir.
What's the matter? Is he one of them radicals?
Mr. Grant? Oh, no, I'm always kidding him about being too conservative.
Young lady, there ain't no such a thing as being too conservative.
I said I was kidding.
You know, that's one thing you can't be too careful these days. What with them long-haired hippies are running around with them wild clothes on, why, I can't... Oh, I'm okay. I'm a cowboy. I think I need a shot of who gets on. So they're firing him, huh? How old is this here, Grant feller?
He's 45.
Amazing. 45. You know, it's on my 45th birthday that the studio called me in and told me I was through. That's when I found out. You know that building that they fired me in? I owned it.
You didn't know that?
No, you see, I had this here accountant feller, and unbeknownst to me, why, he'd been investing my money for me. You name it, I owned it lock, stock, and barrel, thanks to good old Slim Schwartz.
That would be your accountant.
Yeah, and I thought I was washed up.
And you weren't, and neither is Lou Grant. That's why I came to see you.
Well, I make it a point not to butt into the way my business is handled, but let me just kind of twist it around in my mind a while. I'll be a-getting back to you, Miss,
Richards.
Well, I'll be a-seeing you, Slim.
Okay.
Well, as you can see there, that's about as much as you can squeeze into one brief video of a Texan. And in fact, if you watch TV, you'll notice if someone is noted to be from Texas, they routinely wear cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. They might wear a bolo tie. They will understand that's generally a little more west of here. They're somehow involved with oil or money in some form. Maybe they're involved with NASA. But that kind of becomes the stereotype of Texas, is what people see. And of course, again, it's rooted in some reality because we do have cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and we do carry guns. Now, as we're looking at stereotypes, we've gone to the US, a lot of things that are sort of Southern and Texan, but we can also look at distinctions within Texas as large as we are. I think mostly outside of the US, I don't think people would be aware. But for example, with some of our cities, here's our 4 biggest cities, each one has its own stereotype. So with Dallas, we have cattle ranches and oil and business. In Austin, we have entertainment, tech, and of course, fun in some form. We are, after all, the fastest growing city in the US. And the one before us was Las Vegas, and the one before that was Orlando. Obviously, those Orlando and Las Vegas are entertainment capitals. We are in our own way, but then with tech as well. Houston, a little more reserved. It's a little more formal. There's oil and, of course, the space industry's there. So I'd like to show you, if you know the comedian Fred Armisen, he's quite a good mimic. Part of his act is he goes to the US, he has accents for all of them. I can tell you, even from states I've lived in, it's pretty accurate. But he even distinguishes here the difference between Dallas, Austin, and Houston. And I think it's pretty funny, but it also sort of rings true.
Texas, I kind of, Dallas to me seems the most forthright, but then Houston, I feel like they're scolding you a little. Houston, but Austin wants to have fun. I would like to put a little laugh in Austin, Dallas, Houston, Dallas.
So there we go. I don't know how accurate you think that is. We'd have a whole discussion about that. But it is kind of interesting in the difference. You wouldn't think, because even people outside the US think the South is one entity. And of course, we're about 130 million people. We go from Baltimore to El Paso, technically 3 time zones. But he's got it defined to these levels. Now, I would argue that at this point with media, a lot of people outside the US do know the difference between these cities. Okay, and we'll get a little more to that in just a bit. But let's get to our 4 main areas, which are greetings, meetings, dining, and refining. So first of all, in greetings, Americans do tend to be informal. It shows that everyone is equal. You should always shake hands in business meetings. And that's really in small groups, or when you meet somebody for the first time, you do shake hands. This varies. I think Americans are surprised. We're aware of sort of the French custom of the sort of air cheek kissing, and whether it's 1, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. But we sort of take for granted, I think, that the handshake is universal, and it's not, because generally Americans have a firmer handshake than in other countries. To them, our handshake seems aggressive. To us, it seems, I think we call it a limp fish. We see it as weak if you don't have a firm shake. By the way, maybe it goes back to the Conestoga wagon. It goes back beyond that. Of course, the original shaking hands was to see if you had any weapons hidden up your sleeve or somewhere. And this is a way to show that you were unarmed in your hand and up your sleeve. You want to shake firmly for 2 to 3 times, and you want to maintain eye contact. It's seen as a little deceptive if you don't look someone in the eye. And if you offer your hand first, that presents yourself as both confident and friendly. Now, it used to be, if you go back 25 years or more, that there was the issue of a man could offer his hand to another man, but he could not offer his hand to a woman. A woman had to offer her hand first. But this is simply not true anymore. There are simply no divisions whatsoever. And that certainly makes things easier in business, because if you're standing there waiting, it may appear rude that you're not shaking a colleague's or potential colleague's hand. So of course that's gone at this point. Arguably, if it's in a big group, even if you haven't met people yet, you can say hello by simply raising your hand, hello, because you're saying it to everyone, time permitting. So let's take a little look at that. You know, you can actually have learn to do this. Now, I thought this was maybe the best example. This is a very talented man here who, for his students in this elementary school, has developed a unique informal handshake for each of them. And we'll contrast that, of course, with the etiquette style handshake.
I would say if I put the lights down right here, is this right to feet? Thank you. Thank you very much. You ready, Chef? I don't know if you're ready. You ready? All right, what you got?
Wow. Now that is a talent there, but it does show that Americans, even in this setting, like to be friendly, even if we're not friends. And one acceptable area of touch is with the hands in very expressive ways. But of course, we can also go the formal route.
Hi, I'm Laura Caton from Caton Consulting, and today we'll be talking about tips for a proper handshake. Has anybody ever given you the slippery wet fish? How about the nurse handshake where they're taking your pulse? How about the over-enthusiastic UFC handshake? How about the finger handshake where they just shake your fingers? So let's talk about the elements of a proper handshake. Your web must connect to somebody else's web to give a complete handshake. Then curl your fingers around. Squeeze. The 2 words you want to remember are firm and brief. And then pump 2 or 3 times. So what are the main elements to remember about giving a proper handshake? First, your web must connect to somebody else's web to give a complete handshake. 2, curl your fingers around and then squeeze. Pump 2 or 3 times. The words you want to remember are firm and brief. Then introduce yourself and let go. So what does your handshake say about you? Thanks for tuning in. And check out more of our videos to help you enhance your chance for success.
Now, of course, it's very interesting. There's nothing new about the handshake. During the pandemic, of course, we were all online as we are now. There was some evidence that people were moving to a sort of a namaste move. You can do it a lot faster down the line, but it would seem that the touch, the formal handshake, is in full gear now. It's fully back on, and it's a way that we're saying perhaps to each other that we're all back in person. Okay, now let's add a Southern and perhaps a Texan touch to this. I have friends who are from other parts of the country and they find this perplexing. I would argue This is our version of the French or Belgian 2, 3, 4 air kisses on cheeks. If you don't get it right, it's uncomfortable, you're close to someone. And this is called the neck hug. Now, if you, depending on where you're from, you know what this is, or you don't probably, but it's especially something with relatives. I know when we have family reunions, the first 20 minutes is everybody doing neck hugs, because you gotta meet everybody or it's rude. Or they come up to you later, I didn't get my neck hug yet. So it's a family member, a friend, or even a good acquaintance. Obviously not in the business setting, but if you got to know someone more, they might offer this. If you had a great conversation, it began with a handshake, it might end with a neck hug, especially if everyone's relaxed, maybe had a couple of drinks. It's not invasive, it's not a full body hug. It's particularly after long absences. So let's say you had a colleague from another country you visit, maybe they're back in 6 months or a year, and this is a way of saying, hey, it's been a while. So what you do, you extend your arms roughly to 10 and 2 position. You're saying, I'm open, please see me, and they do the same at different angles, and you just maintain it for a few seconds. It is not an intimate hug, it is not a body hug.
Today I'm here to talk to you about the different types of hugs. This right here is the friend zone hug. If she hits you with the side hug, you're in the friend zone. This right here is the family hug, or the I haven't seen you in a long time. Hands go on opposite sides and then a little shake afterwards. Real fake smiles.
Yeah. So there's a recognition that as much as we smile and are friendly without being friends necessarily, it's got to be an over the top smile, like the over the top width of the hug, because it is short, but it is saying, I'm really glad to see you in ways that words can't really express. It's just for a few seconds. So you might go down the road, not unlike the way people line up with the queen or the king and, and introduce themselves or shake hands or whatever else it is. This is what you do when people know each other. It makes it seem that you're a standoffish person, and people that do have touch issues may not prefer that. But if you do, you might be able to get through okay, because it's just for a few seconds. Okay, now, so let's talk about language. I think this is also something that throws off people that aren't American in the way we use questions where we don't expect answers. Of course, those are called rhetorical questions. It's also called phatic communication, P-H-A-T-I-C. This is communication we use because it's more comfortable than doing nothing, but it doesn't require an answer. So for example, this will be in formal and informal settings, and it might mean, for example, you shake hands, smile, you may maintain eye contact as we've covered, but the first things you would say formally is, how do you do? Now, I remember when I lived in Belgium, somebody asked me, what's the difference between how do you do and how are you? And I said, well, the only answer to how do you do is how do you do? Both people say it, there's no answer. And you only do it once because you only do it the first time you meet them. In fact, if you do it again later, you're telling the person, I don't remember meeting you before. You have to be careful about that. So that's it. How do you do? How do you do? Now, of course, in more informal settings, after first meeting, you might say, how are you? And you might respond, how are you? Or you answer, sort of, you say, fine, thank you, how are you? You don't actually go into personal details. Now, I found this for friends visiting that I've hosted from Europe. They find it perplexing. They say, why does everybody ask me about me all day long? I'm like, they're not asking. They're not friends, they're being friendly. We'd like to know that we're both going through the day okay, back to the Conestoga wagon. Hey, is everything okay? Is the pig in the back doing okay? And, are you headed to your destination? And why are you crossing paths? I'm going to where you're coming from. Is that not a good place? We're kind of checking on the flow of our room, of our society that way. Now you'll notice that it's almost as a joke. People will take it literally. There's the stereotype of an elderly person when you ask how they're doing and they tell you about their aches and pains. But it is a different question, no matter your age or who you are. If you say, how are you? And want to know, but that's a friend thing, not a friendly thing in itself. I will tell you what my grandfather used to say to make it short. they'd say, how are you? He would put it a rating of 0 to 100%. If he's having a good day, he'd go, how are you doing? He would say about 90%. And he would rate it. If it was like 60%, that wasn't a good day for him. Now, I also wanted to show this just as a GIF here. Let's talk about the what's up nod. So you may have met someone. Let's say you were at a barbecue or a picnic with your colleagues. It's it's a business setting, but it's informal. And let's say that you've already met everyone. You've either said hello, you've shaken hands, but let's say you're walking from the barbecue to a seat and they're going to the barbecue. Well, if you just look at them and walk by, Americans would consider that rude. So we have this backwards nod that says, I see you there. It's phatic. It's better than doing nothing. It's, I see you there. It's kind of saying, how are you doing? But you don't feel like talking, and you don't need to because you just met them 20 minutes earlier. I find this interesting because when I lived in Europe, I noticed some Europeans did this too, and it's hard to know where it actually may have come from. But it's definitely more of a masculine style of communication. I think men tend to do it more than women, but of course, obviously, those lines are long since blurred. Okay, so let's talk about language with a Texas touch. It's one of the first things people think of in Texas language is the way we say hi and the way we say you. So each region of the country is distinguished by how it pluralizes you. You've probably heard up north somebody saying you skies. Well, of course, in the South and including Texas, we say y'all, which means you all. And if you think about it, it works well. Romance languages, French, Spanish, Portuguese, etc., Italian, and other languages have a singular and plural you, and we don't. So this way, you may be talking to someone, but there are three people surrounding them. The reason to say y'all is to indicate that it's everyone there. I do know that some people will say y'all referring to one person, and I think it's a form of being formal, like using the formal vous in French instead of tu to show deference or to authority or politeness. But of course, also regionally, we say hey instead of hi. If you're used to doing that and you're somewhere else, when I lived in Illinois, if I said hey, it instantly identified me as a Southerner. By the way, it comes in quite handy in some Scandinavian countries because that's the word for hi is hey, except it's spelled H-E-J. And of course, if the group is even larger, you double pluralize it by saying all y'all. And that's pretty good. You're just making sure, because if you invite someone, the person standing beside them is not sure they're invited. All y'all is going to help there. But of course, the ultimately Texan form of hi is howdy. And when you combine it with y'all, you get howdy y'all. I mean, I'm sure there are shows and plays and books with that phrase embedded. It is ultimately Texas. I'd like you to notice this picture. I saw this when I was in IKEA. I guess inviting people as they're getting together their homewares. Notice they put howdy y'all. Maybe they did it in the one in Dallas and Fort Worth and Houston as well, or San Antonio. We have 5 of them now. But you'll notice you probably don't even flinch seeing it, except it's saying, I know we're in Texas. So let's talk about names and positions. So Americans, and especially Southerners and Texans, tend to be very informal when it comes to addressing others. If you're addressing colleagues and you know them both, it's incumbent upon you to introduce them and by full name. And then that way they can refer to them as a title and last name or just first name. So Tom Jones, this is Mary Matthews. Now, there's a sort of a standard Southern thing. The way I was raised is that if there are 3 people and one person knows the other 2's names, they should introduce them. And I can't really talk to them until I've been introduced. It's taken a while to get over that because it's very uncomfortable. But if the host doesn't introduce you, You introduce yourself and you might note your position, right? How are you? I'm Fred Lopez, Director of Operations. You notice there's no title in there, but maybe you're trying to figure out what is your role. And that way the person being introduced does not have to say it themselves. Likewise, that could have gone into the host. This is Mary Matthews. She's Director of Operations. Now, we might also look at titles. Americans loathe titles. We specifically ban the use, for example, in our founding of royal titles. Technically, Paul McCartney in the US is Mr. McCartney. He's not Sir Paul McCartney because we don't really recognize royally given titles. It is in opposition to our notion of an equal democratic society. Now, they have boiled down, of course, as you know, since the 70s, it slowly changed. We no longer use Miss and Mrs., we use Ms. because it's not incumbent upon the person in a conversation to determine whether they're married or not. Likewise, it's uncomfortable in terms of age because mademoiselle and madame in French are similar, right? If a woman is of a certain age, but she's not married, she's still called madame, like we would call someone ma'am, or in this case, Mrs. So this actually saves us a lot of trouble. So really the only degrees, the only titles based in gender and degrees you use everywhere are Mr., Ms., and Doctor, but probably not Miss or Mrs. Hi, John, I'd like you to meet Dr. Sarah Lang. So that way it gives them the credit for their position, their achieved title that follows them everywhere. But she can always say, as I say at the bottom, please call me Sarah. She could have been Dr. Lang. Notice that titles elsewhere, and this is kind of an odd thing in society today. We have Chef Gordon Ramsay. Of course, chef's not really a title. It's just his job. Judge Judy, well, in the courtroom, she's Judge Judy, but outside the courtroom, she's Ms. Shineland, So titles are really only used within an organization. I got a little chart here of some. It depends on the organization. In academia, we have provost, chancellor, we would say in front of someone's name, but you would never use that outside of academia. And of course, there are many levels in a company. They may even round it off. I've heard people called like VP Smith, and VP is not their initials, it's vice president, right? That depends, and they'll let you know. I should add to this too, by the way, that we have one extra category of naming someone. For example, if I see someone who used to be a student and run into them in public somewhere, they'll sometimes just call me by my last name. They go, hey, Clark, it's good to see you. And it's a nice thing. It's saying, I don't have to use a title with you, but I don't think I know you well enough to call you by your first name. And it's kind of a compliment because it's saying you're one of the guys. And the guys could be guys, meaning men or women. But you have to be careful. But the point, of course, our job here is to start with the formal and move to informal. You can never go in the other direction. You can never start with informal and go to formal. So be as formal as needed and someone's called by their first name. But if you start with first name, it may be uncomfortable because they prefer to be called by their title and last name. Okay, let's talk about social spacing. In the scale of things, basically what you can do is simply look, for example, at a map of Europe. The further north you go in Europe towards Scandinavia, the further apart people stand. The further toward the Mediterranean, the closer they stand. So we have different zones. Some, of course, are intimate zones. That's with somebody you're very, very close to. Personal zone, social zone, and even public zone when you like give a speech. And it's very important to maintain the distance. When in doubt, add more distance. Studies show this over and over. If you get into an elevator in Stockholm, Sweden, and you stand too close, the person will get off on the next floor. But if you are in Rome or Athens, someone will stand right beside you. I had a roommate who was American, but his parents were Greek. And when he would talk, he would stand about 4 inches in front of you. And I noticed I kept backing up until I started to hit the wall. And I said, stand where you are, and I'm going to back up. Because we naturally do it. We don't even think about it. If someone is backing up, they're trying to tell you, probably unconsciously, that you're standing too close. Now, this is a tough thing to keep up with, right? Because people do it in different countries. I'd argue this is one that's tough, even if someone, say, is from another country here, you might want to recognize their distance, because err on the side of more space, because it's so instinct, they don't even know why they're uncomfortable and that they're backing up. Of course, we avoid PDA or public displays of affection generally, touching, putting arms over shoulders, deep hugging, kissing, except for friends and family. Arguably only one area, at least in Western culture, where it is appropriate to touch is a clothed shoulder, not a bare shoulder. You might tap someone's confirmation. Again, like the handshake, the touch helps move things along. That is one acceptable area, but you have to check if it's if it's not someone from a Western culture. Of course, you want to make direct eye contact, but not stare. I know this varies a lot. After living in Belgium, I noticed I had to learn to look at somebody longer than is comfortable for people in the US. So I gave it a try. One day I was walking down a sidewalk and I just looked at somebody going by, and it so bothered them that they jumped off the sidewalk and walked in the grass. I'm not going to do that again, but I certainly learned the value of eye contact. No eye contact is off-putting, but too long is also off-putting. Okay, so attire. Well, of course, Americans dress more formally in business settings and very informally in social settings. You know, if you're not sure, call someone ahead, email them, text them, watch what they do. When in doubt, dress more formal, because you can always take off a tie or a jacket. Think of it this way. If you're in a room full of people in business suits and you're wearing a tux, everyone thinks you have somewhere to go. But if you're in a room full of tux and you're wearing a suit, it looks like you didn't get the memo. Generally, the standard is here, pre and post pandemic, a dark suit with colorful neckties and socks. That's a way for men to show their style. The suit should be charcoal gray or navy. Never wear a black suit. That's for morticians. It's way too formal in that sense. And some businesses now allow, it's not even really a step down to business casual, allow open shirts with pocket squares instead of ties. So there is that dash of silk and color. You'll notice sometimes the meteorologist on the local news will sometimes not wear a tie and wear the open shirt. It's not crisply pressed and all with a pocket square. It also provides a way you're not worried about the tie being straight, and there's an asymmetry to having the pocket square because it's on one side. And in fact, you'll see now they sell a lot more pocket squares than they used to. And of course, some are pre-folded, so you don't have to worry about it. And of course, women can dress similarly. Gender has become a lot closer together in business attire, along with blouses and dark skirts. But you want to avoid low-cut blouses, short skirts, and noisy jewelry, which are best left to the nightclub later in the day. You can see this picture here of someone who's kind of really pushed the limits. I would argue this is as close as you can get to being, well, a Texan cowboy and being formal, right? Because there's a weathered denim shirt, denim pants, but a nicely matched belt, jacket, and pocket square. Okay. Of course, we dress more formally in business settings. If it's in a restaurant or a host house, it's probably going to be more informal unless you've just come from a meeting. So business casual, slacks or khaki pants with a button down or polo. This is how my students dress when they do presentations. One of the most telling things, let's not forget, Sherlock Holmes judged people by the shoes they wore because he could tell where they've been, you know, the dirt or whatever's dust on their shoes. So you want to have ready to go a pair of black or brown non-athletic shoes. And a sport jacket or blazer is a nice touch. It can be taken off. Now, in some cases, you can get by with very new kinds of blue jeans. They're drenched. They've basically not been washed. They have no fading and no holes. And that might really be nice for backyard barbecue, because you certainly don't want to get barbecue sauce on a nice pair of slacks or khakis. Women can do likewise. There's a lot of crossover between gender here, and likewise with drenched dark jeans. Of course, let's look at the Texas touch. The thing that we're all talking about here is jeans and boots. It's a way to show pride in Texas that the Lone Star State was once, at one point, its own nation. And so these are emblems of that time. You might want to check with the host, because if you're showing up in cowboy attire and they're not, that's going to be embarrassing. So you want to double check. So men wear, and if I understand correctly, they have to be Wrangler jeans. They can't be other brands. Boot cut over the cowboy boots, a Western shirt, leather belt, and you could have a fancy belt buckle. And we saw with, well, in some cases, it's possible someone wore chaps. I have to say, I've never seen them, but I did go to an event this year and I had cowboy boots, but I didn't have a hat. Get this. They provided hats for us. They were made on the spot. I mean, sized on the spot, and you could added a feather. Quite nice, quite comfortable. Obviously, women can do the same. The difference that I found confusing as a non-Texan is that women can wear their jeans inside the boots, which is the way people outside of Texas think boots are worn anyway. Okay, so let's talk about types of hat. Of course, there are different types. There's a straw hat for the summer, and you can wear cowboy boots without it, but you can't wear the hat without the boots. And you have to be careful about it, but you can also get a felt hat for the winter. It's a little bit warmer and a little pricier. And of course, you don't want to wear it when it's hot because you'll sweat. It's kind of odd for us today. It's 99 or something, and it's fall. You just got to check. You just got to check, and it's got to be the right one. This is a case where I would say you should contact a Texan colleague and go, can I wear this, and can you take a look at it before we meet everyone else? Okay, so here's an example. If you remember the old show from the late 70s through the 80s, Dallas. This is a rodeo. It is a rodeo, not a formal dinner. And we can see here kind of the ultimate cowboy dress.
Pow, flat on my back in the mud.
Yeah, I know it all seems like great fun to you.
No danger to the
my
left.
partner will stop at the time. Bobby. God, I told you he'd show. Now what are we gonna do?
We get rid of him real fast. Come on. Mama. Digger.
Digger.
It's all right, Pam. I've already...
So look at the mix of styles here. The people on the left are wearing more formal gear, but with a cowboy hat for some reason. And the ones on the right are in full Western gear, as if they'll actually be in the rodeo. You might want to check with someone. Okay, so how about gifts? Americans not really, we love gifts. We love gift-giving season and things like that. We spend a fortune, for example, on Mother's Day. It's the biggest day of the year for giving flowers. But we don't really give those so much in business settings. This tends to be, for example, a more Asian custom. But if you're visiting someone's home, or for a dinner party or a barbecue, you always bring something. I find it, I was going to a party with someone and they weren't going to bring anything. And I'm just horrified by that, because that's just rude. You bring something that's simple. You've got that bottle of wine, not the $6.99 bottle, make it the $12.99 or $15 bottle. But it could also be flowers, but the problem is that requires the host to immediately look for a vase and put them in there with water. It could be chocolate. It's got to be careful if it's hot. It could even be a book if it reflects maybe something that's been discussed. And of course, it's open upon arrival, and you should be excited even if it's something that you don't like or don't want. Of course, if you're visiting, as we do, something from your own culture makes a particularly nice gift. Oops, didn't mean to go forward yet. Hold on just a second. Of course, you want to avoid personal or expensive items, which also causes a problem because the business will see that as forming some sort of favoritism. Now, you notice the cup here. I don't know if you recognize it. This is something I got, one similar, from our visiting Danes. It is a George Jensen, who is a designer in Denmark, a George Jensen design mug. It's really nice. And it's very decorative. It turns out I really like using it as well. Okay, meetings. The best thing I've seen about meetings I read was this. Meetings in the US are usually informal, but the content is serious. So the proceedings in the meeting are not so that issue, it's that work gets done. People don't want to be in meetings. Remember, we're individualists. We want to be in those meetings as less time as possible. You want to arrive 5 to 15 minutes early. Keep in mind in Austin, traffic is heavy. It's better to be early, stare at a wall, look over your phone, look over your notes, than to get late. especially if it's hot, you sweat, think about it. People will confuse heat sweat with nervous sweat. You want to prepare in advance, be ready with your facts and figures, a flash drive, whatever it is for your presentation, bring copies of an agenda. You might email them afterwards for someone who wasn't following along or loses their agenda. And remember that only written contracts are legally binding. Oral contracts aren't accepted. Be careful of the word verbal. All contracts are verbal. That means they have words. What they really mean is oral contracts. Business cards are still out there. You'll find that there's no formal ceremony for these. You might want to keep them a little holder so they don't get bent. It looks a little careless to have a bent cornered card. So go ahead and get a little card carry metal case. You can put it in your pocket or your purse or wherever's convenient for you. And you might give these out at the beginning of a meeting, at the first time you're meeting a group of colleagues. But certainly if you talk to someone, you go, hey, if you want to talk further, and you hand them your card. Often now, of course, they have QR codes. So right on their phone, they can use it to enter you as a contact if they like, without typing in the words. Now, on the other hand, on one hand, we're going more digital, but the flip side is we've got much better production of high quality cards now on two sides. They can be different shapes. They can be glossy. They can even have holograms on them. So that's just that little extra touch. Who is that guy that gave me the card with the hologram on it? Okay, language, this is kind of a funny chart. We like directness. We don't like circular reasoning. For example, in the Middle East, circular reasoning and analogies are used a lot. We don't like it because it sounds like you're being deceptive by not getting to the point. So places have figured out the whole chart of how meetings should go, but you'll notice the main thing in the middle is they're straightforward in a line. Yes means yes, no means no. Maybe really does mean maybe. It's like, I need to think about it or get more information. Unlike in Japan, if you get maybe, it does mean no. It's the same with a child. Your child wants to go to Disney World, and you're really probably not going to do it. You don't tell them no, you tell them maybe. It means no. But in a meeting, maybe really means maybe. Questions are not considered insults. To question someone is a good thing because you need clarification, and better in the meeting than have to follow up later. Likewise, not saying anything is seen as uncomfortable. We don't like silence. In fact, a way to get someone's attention is to use longer pauses. Talk, interject, argue, all of that gets the job done, and then everyone can leave. Okay, just a few more things here. In dining, not much has changed post-pandemic. Business entertaining is usually over lunch or dinner in a restaurant. Whoever extends the invitation is the one who pays. You can always kind of casually bring out your wallet or purse, and they'll say no, no. And that gives them a little extra, a good feeling that they've paid for the meal. Informal home entertaining is also popular. Texas, of course, that might mean a backyard barbecue, and that's a particular treat. Now, where I'm from, barbecue meant pork barbecue. So when I first moved to Texas, I never even had beef barbecue before. That was a new thing. And going to a barbecue is certainly a treat. Now, you always want to arrive at a meeting early, but at an event like at someone's house, you will arrive 10 to 15 minutes after the time. So if the invitation is 6 to 8 p.m., show up at 6:15. You're giving the host a little extra time to set up if they're behind. You do not want to be the first person there, and you do not want to be the last one to leave. If you're going to be a little late, contact the host. They're busy. A text would be just fine. And if there's an RSVP, please do that. For example, the event I went to this year with the cowboy attire, it had RSVP because I had food and drinks and everything. And the host said it was stressful because only 45 people RSVP'd yes, but 100 people showed up. That's tough because you have to plan the food and the drink and how big the venue is going to be sometimes. Okay, some formality. The guest of honor is at the head of the table or the host, and it can be the right of the host. I think these things are not obeyed very much these days. You do wait for the host to eat before you do, because it's a little odd if you get started. You can say no, thank you without reason, or you can call in advance and say, excuse me, but I have gluten intolerance. Will there be things that are not, that have gluten, or that you're a vegetarian? Of course, you don't want to make sounds when you eat. Slurping is considered polite in many Asian countries and is quite rude here. And it's okay to drink, but have no more than 2 drinks. If someone tries to offer you one, you just say, no, thank you. You never want to be the intoxicated one in the room when everyone else is sober. And of course, when you leave, leave before the invitation. So 6 to 8 p.m., leave at 7:45. If you're paying, tip 15 to 20%, though it's automatic for 8 or more people probably. And it's fair to invite someone else. It is just a low-key thing to thank them for their hosting you. Take them to lunch in a couple of days before you go back to your country. Okay, just a few more things here. So table manners, we do have some. Hands usually stay above, up on the table. If you're eating with one hand, the other hand can be in your lap, that's fine, but you should never have elbows on the table. It's a standard American thing that parents teach their children. Keep your elbows off the table. Of course, we have our own American way of eating that we use the right hand with the fork. If we cut, we hold the fork with the left hand, cut with the knife in the right hand, and then switch it back. You can do it the continental way where the fork's always in your left hand, but it does stand out a little. And it is nice, kind of, it's not really taught, but if you leave a little food on the plate, it's saying this is delicious, all I can eat. If you eat it all, it really sounds like I had to eat it because I was starving and I would have eaten anything. Okay, let's see, our time is a little tight here. I think I'm going to skip this video. I have a video here of how to hold the utensils and cut, but cut and switch, but I think we'll skip that for today.
So what's the American style at the core right
now? But I'd like you to show you that faux pas, even in poor families, can be embarrassing. So here's the Andy Griffith Show from the 60s. They're trying to teach this almost feral mountain man, Ernest T. Bass, how to eat at a table.
It's impossible. Look at him.
He's a challenge.
He's a mess. Not that?
Right. That's it.
Here you go.
Mr. Bass, will you pass the bread, please?
Throwing food is a sin.
It certainly is. You pass it, you don't throw it.
I just don't cotton all this. Too daggone many rules. I don't like it. I don't like it.
Now, Ernest T., we're just trying to help you fit into society. Now, you want a girl or don't you? Would you pass the potatoes, please?
Well, what's the matter? I passed it. I didn't eat that.
You don't pass one, you pass the whole thing.
Whole thing?
Whole thing.
So there we go. It's little things we take for granted. We're not so concerned we pass to the left or right of the table, but obviously someone may say, would you please pass? And you do, you pass the platter. Usually things are self-served from the middle, unless it's so formal someone is serving you. At that point, you don't have to worry. Okay. Now let's see what we got here. Why not talk about the really hard thing to kind of talk about is conversation at the table. Now, if you remember, Conan O'Brien used to have a show. He went to this Southern Charm School. Now, it wasn't about how to hold, some of it was about how to hold the utensils, but it's about how to have a conversation. You should get involved in someone's life, but without being too personal. It's that sweet spot in the middle.
Tell them how long you've been a student of Perfectly
I have
Polished.
been with Perfectly Polished for 7 years.
Okay. And what was your crime? I'm noticing that Adam is very well dressed. If you don't mind, I would like to up my game.
Certainly.
Bruce, do you mind? Now it is you who is underdressed. I'll ask you to leave my home. Get out.
Adam, ask him a question. Ask him a leading question to try to get to what he enjoys talking about.
Mr. O'Brien, what is your favorite type of music?
I just listen to whatever's on the radio. I don't care about music.
What type of station do you listen to?
I don't know. I just push buttons till I hear something that kind of sounds familiar. I don't care.
Do you like to travel?
I don't really like to go outside much. I like to stay in my house where I'm most comfortable.
Well, what do you like to do at your house?
I like to just sit in the center of my room and do as little as possible.
So you like to sleep?
I don't sleep that much. I can't sleep. I get these bad dreams.
So you swapped.
How did that go?
Not really great.
I was honest.
I would call you close to being charm-free because you didn't match his level of enthusiasm for conversation.
So there you go. You make basic small talk. You talk about things in the world and you respond to that, right? It's that sweet spot. It's not too personal and it's also not just business. Okay, last, women. We don't have to say much about women in business in the US because women are in all areas of society, including business. If there's a woman in a meeting, you don't assume that she's in an inferior position. This is a standard fodder for American sitcoms where a woman is, say, the vice president and somebody on the other company asks if she'll bring in the coffee, right? It's kind of a standard joke. Women from other countries shouldn't have a problem here. One thing you might be careful about, a one-on-one meeting between a woman and a man for dinner because it could be misconstrued. The easy thing to do anyway is just to meet for lunch because there's a beginning, it's 12 to 1 or something. It's the middle of the day, everyone's out and about, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, just gonna leave you with this. This is something that we would use as a cultural dimensions test. You just take this 36 question test and it will determine which country's cultural dimension, Hofstede's dimensions, that you are most like. I took it. Mine seems to be Norway. On these 6 elements, we looked at 3, these 6 dimensions. And then you can simply look up the country and the US and see how different you are. My biggest difference is with masculinity and femininity because maybe because I lived in a social democracy in Belgium. This is a way to see what your background is. Let's see, I'm afraid we were short here. We also embrace tourism. I was just to show you here, a station in Dallas shows visitors visiting South Fork Ranch that was in Dallas. They love it. They want all the cowboy memorabilia. It's all there, the gun that shot JR, and they love it. They expect oil wells everywhere and luxuries, but they do get to see it in this one sort of mansion ranch. Finally, I saw this at Starbucks. Of course, you can buy, what do they call it? I was here mugs. Here is Texas. It's got all the stereotypes and we embrace it. And they also have mugs for Sid. They don't always do this. This is for Austin. So we have the bats, we have music, we have Pennybacker Bridge, 6th Street, etc. And their promotional video, I'll skip this for now because we are short on time. I apologize. But I just want to show you one more. I want to show you someone who makes videos for around the world. He does them all in 1 minute. This is how someone who doesn't live in Austin sees Austin in 60 seconds. And I think we would embrace it. This is where stereotype and promotion and pride all come together.
Texas is blowing up these days, and one city in particular seems to be capturing most of the national attention. That's right, we're off to Austin. Welcome to another episode of 60 Second Cities, the quick video series that takes you around the world in less than a minute. Austin is the capital of Texas and the southernmost state capital in the United States. It's situated on the Colorado River, not to be confused with the other, larger Colorado River. Austin has 964,000 people within the city and 2.3 million people in the metropolitan area, making it the 28th largest metro region in the US. Today, Austin has made a unique name for itself as a hip urban city, with claims to famous events such as South by Southwest, and a vibrant food scene led by Texas barbecue and Tex-Mex cuisine. For sports, Austin has just a single major league team in Austin FC of Major League Soccer, but is also dominated by the Texas Longhorns of college football. A new 60 Second City premieres every Thursday right here on Geography by Jeff. Next week's city is Bangalore, India.
So, jumping from city to city, but if you want a quick overview, there it is. Well, ladies and gentlemen, would you have any comments or questions about this? Any corrections? I am a longtime Texas resident, but I'm not a Texan. So, did you see some of yourself in there? See a little Austin and Texas and South and US? Yeah. Christine, I see you're amused by that. Was that good?
I can share a quick story. We had a delegation we were in Dallas with, and the main thing that they wanted to see was J.R. Ewing's mansion. So it was part of the tour. We went to a couple other museums stature as well, but that was on the tour.
That's interesting. And there's the time element too. I had a friend visit from Budapest, Hungary, and he went to go see it. First thing he did was he had to get a cowboy hat. It just, I don't know, it didn't seem quite right. But I said, why do you want to? That show was on a long time ago. He goes, well, it's playing right now in Hungary. They see it as now, which is kind of amazing. Now, what did you think being here? What did you think in visiting South Fork?
I mean, I watched it. That's my era. So it was fun to go to. It wasn't something I was driven to go to. I did not grow up in Texas either, but I've been here quite a while, and it was fun. It was fun to see it.
And the guide was probably very enthusiastic about, thank you for coming to see Texas, right? I mean, it is actually a real ranch, right?
Yes,
so
it's a working ranch, and the guides many of them have been there a very long time, so they are very good docents and can share a lot of fun stories about the family.
Oh, the family that actually
the family, the actors who come visit. All kind of the background scene. So it is worth a short visit.
Very nice. Thank you. Yeah. It's hard to admit our stereotypes. When I first moved here, I asked the first week I was here, where do you keep the cactus? Because I didn't see any cacti. I thought I was just in the wet green part of town or something. But I was aware of Dallas. And the first time I will say, I was walking around, I came to Austin to go to grad school at UT, and I saw guys walking around, and I'm like, why are those guys wearing high heel shoes? I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized they were boots, because I didn't know the jeans went on the outside of the boot. And that was new to me. Oh, thanks. Well, about Mexico, here's the thing, right, about people visiting. People always like both things. They want the most local thing, but they also want the thing that's their version of their food, right? Like, I remember going to a Mexican restaurant in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I don't think they'd ever even seen a chili pepper because it was not hot at all. So that's what I would say. Go to both kind of places. What's most awesome. The funny thing there is that I would say go to a Tex-Mex place, because they could see what the variation is on. Plus, Tex-Mex includes mariachi bands, which are Texan, not Mexican, because they include German instruments like trumpets and accordions, which are not Mexican. Oh, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, thanks. And that was, yeah, you can see the link there. But it is funny having to think about in your own fishbowl. It's hard to see your own the impressions people have, and it takes travel, right, to see that. But even within the country, when I moved outside of the South, people said unbelievable things. They had unbelievable. I will tell you, the very first time I encountered someone outside, my very first trip in high school was going with a French class. We're going to France and England. We met a class in DC from Ohio, and they found out we were from North Carolina. And they said, do you have indoor plumbing? And I'd never even heard that expression before. I'm like, what other kind of plumbing is there? Yeah, and they weren't saying it as an insult. They say it the way a 17-year-old asks a question. Oh, Garrow. Yeah, that's like Garrows. That's good. Salt Lick. Yeah, the thing is, I would say people, the ads for it, the ultimate would be take them to Franklin Barbecue, right? You want barbecue, and the one that is most known, you probably have to get a reservation or stand in line. I would go with that. But yeah, if you have a suggestion, what is something that is very Austin that is not barbecue or Tex-Mex? You have to think about that. One thing I show people when they come, I show them Whole Foods. That's Austin's born and bred place, and show the way you can, different way of getting food. For example, from the hot bar. I know that's not a restaurant, but you can get gourmet dishes in one little box. It's a different way of eating. Aditi, where would you take them?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, if we had people in town, I would take them to a place like Loro in South Austin. Loro is a cross between Asian and Texas food. So it's, I think Franklin Barbecue and another restaurant collaborated. So it's, I think it's partly self-service, and people can try what what local Austin food is like, because Austin also has its own culture. Yeah, there is a bit of barbecue. There's a bit of, I mean, we've got Texas, we've got Austin, and then we've got the diversity in Austin that it transcends multiple cultures in one restaurant. So I would do something like Loro, or what's it called? Dope Chinese, or maybe like a staple like Wink, which has been in Austin a long time. So people have an idea of the history behind the restaurant and how it connects with the city.
Yeah, that's a good point about history. What I've done until they'll close just a few weeks ago, I take them like to Hyde Park. I usually go to Westgate. That one just closed, but it's in the old house in Hyde Park. It's kind of standard. And along with that, the one in Westgate actually used to be a Grandy's. The shock for me was the first time I had chicken fried steak. I didn't even know what that is. And that might be something, because even in the outside of Texas, people don't know that. Yeah. Oh, Laura Eats. I didn't know that one. I'm gonna have to try that. Good. Yeah, the mixture thing is really nice. You go to Toronto, you'll see a restaurant that's Malaysian, Indonesian, and they mix, and even Malaysian, Indonesian, Japanese. Because there's always this admixture, and that's what's fun. I mean, Tex-Mex itself is an admixture, but even Mexican food is an admixture of Spanish and native. So the way they mix and remix is nice. You also might think of the spice palette. I have to be careful from people, even from like the Midwest or the North. I go, we're going to go somewhere spicy. Are you good with that? Because we have a really good spice palette here. That's hard in other places. My dad was horrified once that he was served food that had a whole clove of garlic on it, one clove of garlic, because that was too garlicky. And that's the sort of person that's going to have a little problem with hot chilies, hot chili powder, paste, and full-on chilies. Well, I guess our time is a little, anybody else have any comments? You can tell me if I got something wrong too, because I like being wrong about it, so I can go back and go, oh, I get it. And by the way, to be up to date, I polled my students about things. They are so proud to talk about wearing boots and hats and everything. And if I go, can you wear the felt hat when it's warm? They go, no, you'll sweat in it. They're very, very not, proud and knowledgeable, even though they know that everyone thinks we wear cowboy hats. Oh, I forgot to mention something I learned. You can wear a cowboy hat inside, but you usually take it off once you sit down at a table, like in a restaurant. So you need a place to hang it or an extra chair. So you wear it all the way to the table, but then you take it off. But that might be also out of convenience. You don't want things splattering on your hat or falling off onto your food. Anyone else? Well,
I don't see any more questions in the chat, Kevin.
Okay, good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here today. It's fun to talk about other places, and it's especially fun today to talk about our place for other people from other places. It's really nice. Helps me appreciate my own city a little more, and maybe not take it so much. It's easy to take things for granted, and it's nice to see it. Thank you, Bianca. That's really nice. And who was up there? Oh, Christine. Yeah, thanks. Well, I think if that's everything, then I suppose this will be the end of our meeting.
Yes, this is the end of our training, and thank you for joining us today. A link will be sent out via the newsletter soon, and stay tuned for our next training, which will be in the fall, and it will focus on Latin America. So we hope to see you guys at the Latin American training. Thank you for your time, and have a good weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.